What's going on, D-Bags? Hope you guys are doing well. We're back here again with another episode of the Detox Podcast, episode 280 to be exact. If you're new here and enjoy music, podcasts, comedy, or hooping videos, do consider subscribing. We've got a whole bunch of that stuff going on here, and when you do subscribe, leave a like or hang out with us here in the live chat like you're going to do today. Helps us share conversations and laughs like this with more people. So do consider doing that. Helps us out a ton. Now, before I can introduce you to my guest this week, got to talk to you guys a little bit about vacations, vacation time. Let's be real, there's nothing better than a well-earned vacation. And there's no better place to do it than with today's video sponsor, Alpine House 2. Alpine House 2 is a classic Swiss chalet duplex A-frame up in Iron River, Michigan, right? It's a log cabin located directly across from Ski Brule Resort in Iron River. That's one of the nicest ski resorts. If you want to look up pictures of this place, it's beautiful if you haven't been. Otherwise, go check it out if you do enjoy skiing. It's surrounded by forests, lakes, rivers, obviously more specifically Iron River. Alpine House 2 is the destination for fishing, hunting, hiking, snowmobiling, etc., especially as we get into those colder times of the year here in the Midwest. That's basically all we've got to look forward to. So they just finished up their first few months over on Airbnb of almost being entirely booked up. There's tons of fun trails to do snowmobiling, like I said. They've got arcade games inside now. Tons of other fun stuff. So why not check out at Alpine House 2 on Instagram. That's at ALPINEHAUS number 2 on Instagram. To stay up to date with renovations, bookings, etc. They're going to set you up one last time. That's at Alpine House 2 on Instagram. Let them know that Rita Detox sent you, and they're going to set you up with a great vacation. So shout out to Alpine House 2 for sponsoring this episode of the show. With all that stuff out of the way, though, I'm pumped to be kicking it with my guest this week. Let's give a wet detox welcome to licensed therapist and author Anita Astley is in the building. You're here.
You.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you for making the time.
This is exciting.
I'm happy to. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that we made this happen. It's interesting. I live nearby where your studio is, and we want to dox ourselves or anything like that. But I walk by where you sort of have your advertisement, and I'm like, I've seen this like 4 or 5 times now. This is a podcast. I see there's another podcast next door. I never see these people in. I'm like, you had a QR code, so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna scan this, and we're gonna see what's going on. And now here we are.
Here we are, collaborating.
Collaborating, doing the thing. You've got a book that's out right now, and that's sort of how we got linked up, because that was the big thing in your window, was like this book that you have.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, can you give us a little bit of insight as to the book? If people that are listening, they're like, okay, he's got a therapist on, she's an author.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is that?
Okay, so let's get to the title of the book. The book is called Unfuck Your Life and Relationships. It's, somebody asked me, where did you get that title? We'll get into that in a minute. But it's really, the birth of the book it came to life from one of my patients, several patients who would look at me and say, Anita, how could you possibly know what I'm going through? How could you possibly relate to me? You're sitting there on your throne, you look like you got your shit together. And I thought, okay, I'm hearing this enough, and I have people, they make themselves vulnerable to me all the time. It's my turn to share my story and stuff that was really fucked up in my own childhood, but I was able to unfuck it through a very good therapist, Dr. Frank. If you guys want to pick up the book, it is available on Amazon and Simon & Schuster. So I share the vignettes of my therapeutic sessions with him, and I also share some of those fucked up episodes in the book, and then I end the book with 7 things I think people need to do today to unfuck their life and relationships. And you know what? It's not rocket science, but it's some of the stuff that we have forgotten how to do.
Yeah. Especially, we were talking a little bit off air that maybe now with more of distractions, more accessibility with social media and things like that, these things get in the way of maybe those simpler, more intuitive ways to deal with or maybe unfuck our lives, right?
Talking to each other.
Yeah.
People want help. They want solutions. And I often say to my patients, well, did you talk to your wife? Did you talk to your girlfriend? They're like, no. I'm like, well, how do you expect this to get resolved if you're not having a conversation? And just that term I want to talk about. Conversation today means very different things. I'm old, so I'm sitting in there thinking, this is going on for the last 5 to 10 years. When they're talking about these conversations, and then I stop them when they're telling me the narrative, and I realize that they're not talking about a verbal conversation. They're talking about texting. And I'm like, okay, whoa, stop. Texting each other is not a conversation. And I just had to, it's like I have to teach people how to use words again to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Sitting in front of each other, facing each other's Because if you start trying to resolve things through texting, it just leads to greater problems, more miscommunications, more interpretations. And as I talk about in the book, if you have to write me a paragraph, if you have to write me a story, just pick up the phone and call. And I've done this, and my kids will be like, Mom, that's totally not acceptable.
Really? They're like, don't give me a call.
Yeah, no, you cannot return. You cannot call the person. They've texted you. Proper etiquette is to text back. I'm like, no. I'm trying to break this pattern, and that's what I try to do to help people. You want to unfuck shit? Stop texting and start having a conversation. Texting is great for data exchange.
Yeah. Maybe not so much for emotional exchange.
Well, no, because there's so much room for misinterpretation. There's so much room for miscommunication. And literally, you could be trying to resolve one problem, but you can create several. That's happened to me, too, because you can't read feelings in words. But I can. If you and I are having a conversation, like I can kind of figure out through the intonation, like what you're implying.
Yeah, body language is huge.
Absolutely.
Tone is huge.
We miss all of that when we're texting each other. And I'm not a poo-poo of technology. I love texting, okay? Don't get me wrong. But I think like if you're trying to work on a relationship and you're trying to resolve problems, which is what I help people do in my office, you need to be able to sit down with each other and have a verbal conversation. So I want to help you guys listening and watching today. Conversation is not texting. It is sitting with your partner face to face, even through FaceTime, because then you can see each other. Yeah. There's so much that goes awry when we
FaceTime,
can't.
I get nervous on FaceTime, though. I'm not going to lie, because sometimes that lag pisses me off. If you had to have a hard conversation and that lag gets you, I'm just
So getting back to the book, I mean, I do think we need to return to some basic stuff, which is let's just talk about it.
Yeah, and that's what I want to mention one more time, too, so people can kind of put an image to it. So this is Unfuck Your Life and Relationships. And we were talking before we went live that the title was maybe a point of contention when you were trying to like get this made, right?
Well, that was not the original title. Now, if you guys decide to buy the book, and I know you're going to read it tonight when we get off this podcast, I share that in the preface of the book. The title of the book originally was something to do. I'm not going to give it away because I want you guys to read it. Something about butterflies. Now, people who know me really well know that, I love butterflies, but it's not something you'd associate with me. Yeah, they're pretty and stuff, but the word fuck, absolutely, you'd associate that with me. Okay. Not that I go around saying that, but it's more reflective of how I do therapy. It's more reflective of me as a person. It's more visceral, and I try to keep things real and raw in my relationships, but also in the therapy room. And then, what happened is, let me take you back. The book took about 3-4 years to actually get to market. And I have daddy issues. I'm open about that. I share that in the book.
Don't we all?
Well, mommy, daddy, but mine are particularly daddy issues. They're never completely resolved. And at 55, I would think, I've been through a lot of therapy. Not really. So, I use this as an example to kind of highlight that we can have trauma and we can work through that trauma, but it's still there and sometimes comes out. Anyway, so I was working with men. Men were part of this large process. Not that I have anything against men, but because I have daddy issues, when we were talking about the title of the book, I kind of let these men decide what the book should be called. Something to do with butterflies. And then about 3-4 days before it was going to go to press, and this is pretty painful to realize that at such a late point in publication. And I thought, okay, I'm not comfortable with this title. It doesn't really represent me. I knew that viscerally, but I was too scared to say anything because, all the daddies figures around me were saying, no, this is a great title. This is what it should be. So I sat on it and I thought, okay, I have to say something. So I wrote an email to my publishing agent and I said, I'm really sorry to do this so late in the project and of this project of this magnitude, but I'm not comfortable with this title. And then I wrote like this huge apology for why I didn't like the title, why it didn't represent me. And what I got back was this email saying, hey, that's great. What do you want to call it? And I said, I'd written him back to say, I want to call it this. He's like, yeah, that's great. Wow. But it's interesting how I reverted back to being that little girl who was afraid of these older men, and men represented authority, and men represented like, okay, they have the answer, I don't have the answer. And I was taken back because I thought, oh my God, I feared that they would be upset with me, I'd be punished somehow. It's that inner child, the little wounded girl inside of me who sometimes gets triggered. And I share that in the book in the preface because I want people to know, as I share with my own patients, that we can work so hard on our issues, but we always have to be aware that they're still kind of there. And sometimes they come out, but we need to become aware of them, and we need to fix it when it happens. So I became very aware that, a little bit late, but at least I became very aware of it. And I did something about it. When I was very young, I wouldn't do anything about it. I would just kind of let things happen to me.
I think that's it's interesting that you say that, because that is so much of what I, as someone who's not a therapist, who just has experienced trauma, sees it in other people as well, right? It's like, I've heard it described many times as like scarring on the brain, right? And where even if you have a scar on your body somewhere, like it's gonna be fully healed, skin works fine. Like I could cut it again, whatever. It's a totally normal scar on my body, but I can still see it there. It's still there. There's going to be moments where maybe you fall back into those ways, but hopefully through bettering yourself, through therapy, through life experience, you can catch it now. Well, I can see myself falling into this, but it's like, oh, this is what's going on, and at least you were able to do that before the book came out. So.
And you can become aware of it and then do something about it. It's when people are in the same, and they keep asking me, Anita, how come I keep doing this, and how come I keep on falling into these relationships that are really unhealthy for me? It's repeating the same mistake. It's because we have to work on it, but we have to become aware of it, and then when that trigger is pulled, then we need to do something about it. We need to take action. So it's not just exploring and understanding where we come from, but it's moving into action. My approach is very directive, as the title of the book, right? It's pretty in your face. Like I always tell my patients, listen, we're not here to blame your parents or your family or whatever happened to you. In some cases, yes, there's a clear right and wrong. But I do believe that most parents do the best that they can with what they know. And when they know better, they do better. And it's trying to really understand what happened so we can move forward and change it. So we visit the past. We're not going to live in the past. We visit it so we can have understanding and we can change things today for tomorrow. Yeah,
use it to inform what decisions we're going to make.
Absolutely.
Because we have to know what's wrong before we can fix what's wrong.
And sometimes you're bringing up a good point. Sometimes people get stuck in the why. Why do I do this? Why do I do this? And sometimes we can answer the why, but sometimes we can't. And I always say to people, how many more years do you want to spend on trying to figure out what the why is? We know what needs to change. We tried to figure out the why, and we couldn't, and we didn't. But let's get to the what, because the what we know needs to change. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious, when did you realize that maybe your life was fucked?
I left home when I was 16. Okay. I'm from an Indian background, and probably way before then, because I literally ran away from home. And I don't blame my parents. My parents are immigrants. They were just, my dad, that's where my dad was the authoritative person in the family, patriarchal family. My mom overcompensated for him. And he was just doing what he knew how to do. He wanted me to have an arranged marriage. He wanted me to dress a certain way, look a certain way. And I was in Montreal, Canada. I was just trying to I wanted to be like everyone else. But then I had this bind. When I came home, I was expected to be the nice Indian girl. But when I was at school, I was expected to be a nice girl, but a Western person.
You're trying to fit in a different way.
I'm trying to fit in. So I had a double bind going on, and it was so difficult to make those things congruent because the two cultures are very conflicting.
And so it came to a point at around 16. That's when you were like, I can't anymore.
That's when I left. Yeah.
There was talks of arranged marriage at 16?
Way even before that.
Wow.
The biggest disservice my father ever did for me. And in the end, we did make peace. And, he worked really hard. I don't want to sit here and bash him. He did the best that he could with what he had and what he knew, and within cultural context for that generation. I was groomed to be married. That's, very earlier on, my father made it very clear my purpose in life was to find a good husband. And he would do that for me. So I grew up with that. And looking back now, I think, oh my God, if I didn't focus on that. If I didn't have that in my brain, I could have done so many other things perhaps. And, but I can't undo any of that. All I can do is focus on today and what I want to do with that.
I'm curious. I'm actually a little interested in that because I mean, that's something that I think people like hear about a lot is like, oh, there's arranged marriages overseas. Like, we hear about this thing. How is that like day to day, like growing up though? Like, is that because he's saying like, oh, basically your purpose as my daughter is to get married to a good family.
Yeah.
What is maybe something in like a more regular everyday sense in a way, or a way that shows up in an everyday sense?
Everyday sense, learning how to cook, learning how to be a good wife. You know, my father would say to me, you need to learn how to cook because how are you going to run a household? What's your husband going to be thinking? And I thought, damn, I'm only like 8 or 9 years old. I don't want to marry. And I don't want to marry anybody that's like you because you're so mean.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had his own issues and my parents had a very conflicted relationship. But I was always in the middle of that. So it was a very negative way to look at myself. And ultimately, you know, I took in all those messages on a very unconscious level because even though I ran away from it, I did exactly what he wanted me to do. So that's to demonstrate how powerful the unconscious mind is and how we really internalize those messages from a very early age. Even though I thought, okay, I'm out of here, I'm rebelling against this. But in the end, I did what he wanted me to do.
Wow. Yeah. Did that, like, when you're sort of realizing that about yourself, were you upset about that? Like, did that?
No, I wasn't upset. I just changed things. You know, I've always been a very resilient kid and a resilient person.
Yeah.
So I write about that in the book, that I've never seen myself as a victim, but always a survivor, because my perspective is that my parents had good intentions, particularly my dad, and he was just doing what he was taught to do. He was born in India. He was the firstborn son in a family of 7. And his job, he did his job really well. He married off his sisters. He worked very hard for the family. So he was just doing what he was supposed to do and what he learned to do himself. And I think, you know, in the end, when I think about his life, and I share that in the book, that he was suffering from depression, and men manifest symptoms of depression in a very different way than women do. In terms of irritation, he was always very angry. I always experienced him as an angry person.
Yeah, were you like fearful of him?
Absolutely. I lived in fear of my father. And looking back, and especially when I was writing the book, it was quite an emotional experience. I reflected on my father as the man that he was, not necessarily my father. So think about that. Think about your parents.
Yeah.
We always think of them as parents. That's my mom, that's my dad. That's you know, their primary role to us. But when I was actually able to look at him as a man and his narrative, I look at him now with a lot of compassion. He's since passed away, but I think, wow, he did amazing things with his life, and he had a lot of challenges, and he suffered from depression, which was undiagnosed, hence not treated. So he never had the privilege that I had and the choices of going to therapy. I was in therapy as part of my program. You know, I share that story in the book. I had to go for therapy to get my license as a therapist, ultimately. And I was in therapy for, I think, 8 years. I had to go twice a week. And I remember my first session with Dr. Frank. I love Dr. Frank anyway. You guys can read all about him in the book. Yeah. I sat down. I said to him, yeah, Dr. Frank, I don't have any issues. I must have been about 20 in my 20s. I said, I'm only here for didactic purposes. I have to be here to get my degree and all that kind of stuff. He literally looked at me like, okay, sit down.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in that process, I realized that, wait a minute, I need this to really work on unfuck myself. I'm just not here just for the learning purposes. I'm here to resolve the issues that I have. And there are a lot of issues. And I learned that it was okay to have those issues as long as we are able to work through them and not use them in our relationship to hurt other people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that does. I think it can be scary when we don't realize maybe that I think we're trying to like fit in, right? We're trying to just
we all do that.
Appease and socially navigate. And so maybe we're not taking the time to realize sort of like if our life is fucked or not fucked. I think maybe we want to believe that it isn't most of the time.
But can I just say that Can we just agree that everybody's life is kind of fucked up, and that's okay?
Everybody's. I don't know anybody that isn't.
Different levels of fucked upness.
There's levels to it for sure, and I sometimes I'm definitely envious of people that have less of it, but it is. I don't know anybody that there's nothing fucked.
Yeah, and I don't think I envy them. I'm thinking like, okay, this has created who I am today, and I always, people will say to me, well, when am I going to be completely unfucked? And I say, you're not. It's an evolving process, and shit happens to us throughout our life. So it's continuous, and it stops when we die because life is dynamic, and we don't know what's going to happen all the time.
How can people start to like maybe be more aware? How can they start to, I guess, personally work on figuring out whether or not their life is fucked, or at what level it is, so they can decide what their next potential moves are, whether it's therapy, whether it's what kinds of modes of therapy, or maybe it's getting into fitness or whatever they need. How can people take a second to look at themselves in an accurate way?
Well, I mean, it's so hard because it's really hard for us to look at ourselves objectively, and nobody's really objective. We have all our stuff that we bring to the table.
We have a lens.
We have a lens, right? And that lens is skewed. And if I gave you my glasses, you would be able to see clearly. They're meant for me, and I see things a certain way. But I would say that relationships, if you're struggling in relationships, and this is happening most of the time in your relationship with similar issues, then you need to look at what you're doing that's not working and not everybody else. Because like I'm sure you've heard this before, if it's everybody else, then it's got to be you. People will come to me and say, why do I always find myself in similar patterns with men, in similar patterns with women, even in my family, even in my friendships? And I have to say, well, let's look at what's going on with you. What are you doing? What's your role in it? Because it's so easy to blame the other person and say, well, this person is doing that to me. This person is doing and not listening. But I would say, what is your role? In every conflict that we are in, we have a role. Sometimes it's a smaller role than the other person, but we have a role in it. And when are we going to finally stop that pattern and look at what that role is? When we're able to do that, when we can start to break some of those patterns and change. It's like dominoes. If I shift a little bit, then every domino is going to have to operate.
Is going to fall differently.
It's going to fall differently. So I need to acknowledge my role in it and then work on changing some of that, which is really difficult because most of us don't want to look at ourselves.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's on your site. I'm sure it's probably in the book as well. Everything starts with a conversation is a mantra of yours.
Everything starts a conversation, and the first conversation is the one you can have with yourself. My kids sometimes say, Mom, your lips are moving. I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to myself. It's a really aggressive conversation. Yeah. The first chapter in my book is self-awareness. And people ask me, what does that really mean? What is it to be self-aware? What does it mean to you when I say to you, okay, we're going to work on this part. We're going to work on self-awareness. What does that mean to you?
I guess just trying to be, for me, maybe because I have more of a negative connotation towards, or negative outlook on myself, would be trying to just better understand the things that I'm not doing well. That would be my self-awareness. Yeah. But just being kind of, I guess in a broader sense, just knowing where I am and how I fit into things. Mm-hmm. That would be self-awareness for me, I think.
And if it's working well for you.
Yeah.
If it's working well in your relationship.
If I feel good about it.
If you feel good about it.
Yeah.
And then we are all in relationships. The first one with yourself. We have relationships with people in our family. Yeah. Romantic relationships, platonic relationships, relationship with our peers. Because when people generally hear that term relationships,
they think dating.
They think significant other. They think romantic. Yeah. But the most fucked up ones are the ones we have with our parents.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Right? The primary relationships in our lives set the blueprint for us in terms of what we're going to do as young adults in relationship with others. Now think about that. That's a pretty scary concept.
Yeah, definitely.
A blueprint. What is the blueprint? It's basically your emotional DNA, and that includes emotions, thoughts, feelings, interactions that you've sucked in, you've taken in throughout your whole childhood. Yeah. That serve as a prototype. Okay, this is how I'm supposed to relate to a woman. This is how I'm supposed to relate to a man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary to
think
about.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, especially if you come from a household of childhood trauma, then sort of becoming more self-aware right now is maybe realizing that you're again, because we have the lens and we think, okay, I'm this person. We're the good guy in our stories a lot of times. So coming to grips with maybe I'm not, maybe I am the issue, right? If it's everybody else, then it's probably me. That can be kind of scary. I know for myself, right? Like I have interesting relationships with both my parents. It's not like a secret. I've talked about it before on the podcast that my parents both suffered from like alcoholism in the past, and watching some stuff happen in my childhood growing up, that and the way that the two of them acted and they're no longer together, there's definitely been fears of mine, like, oh, am I acting like in the same way my father did, or am I doing what my mom would do in this situation? And that scared me, and I'm sure they've had similar feelings about their own lives and whatnot. But as you get older, at least in my case, and I've been in therapy now for a while, it is scary. It is a scary conversation to have with yourself.
What was the scariest part for you, or are you in it right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in it right now. So I think like for me, I looked up to both my parents, maybe even more so. Like my dad is like a hero for like a big portion of my life, and then as sort of their relationship fell apart, and thus our relationship like as a family unit kind of fell apart. Sort of seeing the opposite of him that, like he was the villain then for several years, of me kind of like viewing him in that light. And then, we have a pretty cordial relationship now, and kind of coming full circle. But now like seeing him as like the full person that he is, there's just then times where I'll find myself like ways that he saw the world, whether it was like through, I always thought I was almost better than people. Like he was always like, he had this thing where he was maybe better than people. And he would always tell me like, you're the smartest fifth grader I've ever met. You're you're the best at whatever. And I think part of that is great. Like it gave me confidence to do certain things. But then when I realized maybe I'm not the best at X or the best at this, and maybe the way I view other people that aren't stacking up where I think they should, maybe I think less of them, and I feel guilty about it. I'm like, why do I think that? You know, and that scares me sometimes, because I'm like, I see a lot of things I don't like about this person, and I see those same things in myself. So I'm like, fuck.
And that's okay. At least you recognize that.
It definitely, it's something that I'm aware of, but it doesn't make it like go away, at least at this point. So.
Well, one of the things I think, when we talk about self-awareness that we need to work on is projection.
Yeah, I'm projecting all the time.
I'm glad you admit that. I hope you're working on it with your therapist. And we throw this word around, but what does projection really mean? And I'll help you guys out. It's when we take something that's coming from the inside ourselves and we misinterpret it as coming from the outside. And we often do this when we lack self-awareness. And we are often surrounded by people who project their shit we often, you stop projecting your shit onto me. That's your stuff. But people don't do this consciously. It's a very unconscious process, and people learn to project, or they project because as children they were never allowed to share their negative thoughts or their negative feelings. So as young adults, old teenagers, and as adults, full-grown adults, they couch them in comments, and when they couch them, it's kind of like, wait a minute, what does that really mean? Or is that really about me, or is it about really you? Where is the line between this is my issue or is it really your issue, and what are you saying to me? A very simple example of this, and it's happened to me, I'm sure you can relate to it, and everybody watching and listening can relate to this. You're out with a friend, and your friend turns around, looks at you and says, you look really hungry, you look really tired. And I'm like, no, I'm actually good, I'm not even tired. They cannot say, I'm really hungry, I need to eat, and I'm kind of tired, I'd like to sit down. But so what they do is they put it onto you without knowing it. They put it onto you, and then you're kind of left like, no, I didn't know I was giving that vibe out, because they can't they have not been allowed throughout their childhood to share and talk about what they need. They're hungry, they need food, so they've never felt safe saying that. They're tired, they need a break, they've never felt safe saying that. But it's easy to kind of project it onto you. It's a very simple version, but it happens often.
I could see that too.
Or you look angry. I'm not angry.
Or
maybe you're angry, you just can't say you're angry.
I could even see that too, where it's like, describing projection as something it is coming from within, but we're pretending that we sort of project that it's coming from outside,
Yeah.
right? I could see that. I know that it's something that I've done before in the past and even present, where it's like I because maybe I have this dislike of myself,
Mm-hmm.
I have this negative skew. Like I have this skew that I think other people dislike me as well. So
Yeah.
like if I'm reading a text, like
Yeah.
I'm reading it
Yeah.
from the idea of like you're not like you're not shit. Like I'm upset with you, whatever. Like you're in trouble, blank, blank, blank. So then, but that's really me. That's not them. But I'm pretending it's that, and then I'm already getting upset about it. Like
Yeah.
I'm putting this idea onto their words, even though maybe they didn't say it.
Yeah, and
that way.
that's the issue. One of the issues with
Yeah.
texting, like if
That's-
we have a
yeah, big time.
conversation, maybe and we're together, I can kind of see it in your body language. I see it in your tone. But if you're just going to send me those words based on my history, based on my blueprint, my emotional DNA,
Yeah.
I'm going to take that a certain way, and maybe you didn't even mean it that way.
Yeah.
And the story I share in my book about that is, and I use myself as an example because I want people to know that you can be fucked up, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. But if you get the right help, you can unfuck that shit. You don't have to live in that trauma. You don't have to live in that space for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You can get help if you want to get help, and you can get better. We're never totally going to get 100% better, but we
Yeah.
are just going to progress and be a better version of ourselves.
Yeah.
So all my daddy issues, and my dad always made me feel like it was never good enough. He's typical Indian father, brought home an A- or something, like, goes, well, why minus? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you get A+?
Yeah.
So I grew up feeling like it was never good enough, whatever I did. And I remember being in grad school, and I remember writing my thesis, and it was really difficult for me because I was like, okay, I had imposter syndrome. Like, I can't believe I go to McGill. I can't believe I got into a graduate program. Oh my God, I'm going to be found out. So I remember, finishing my thesis. It was the first draft, and I walked into my supervisor's office, and he was amazing. So he was to me a father figure. I looked up to him so much, and we had a very good working relationship. And he knew about my issues. You work closely with somebody long enough, and he was a
They're gonna
mentor
see
to me.
you,
Yeah. So I walked in, I remember putting it on the desk. I immediately start crying. And he's like, I haven't even looked at it. What's going on here, right?
Yeah.
But all my stuff, like, oh my God, I was projecting all the feelings that I had about my dad and how I felt about myself onto him. He didn't do anything to me at all. He didn't even say a word. But I was projecting all that stuff onto him as if he were my father. I was experiencing him like he was my father. And I just became aware of it later on. Like, why is this such an issue? Why am I being so triggered by this experience?
Yeah.
And I just thought, it's because I don't want to disappoint him. And it took me a while to realize, and I was working with, I had just, I think, started to work with Dr. Frank, because I was experiencing him as my father. It's not my dad. And if I did not get help, and I just went on with my life doing that with every male that kind of was representative of the father figure, there'll be some really fucked up relationships, and maybe not everyone would be as understanding as he was. He was completely understanding and helped me through that, and we worked collaboratively together, and that was in parallel to my own therapy. But if that hadn't happened, I was thinking maybe I'd still be doing that, putting all that onto somebody else, when it really just belongs to me, and I need to work on my own issues.
And that's what we talked about it before we went live, that like that's why I think everybody could use some form of therapy. I don't care what form it is, like whatever makes the most sense for you, whatever you can afford, schedule into your life. But I think that everybody could use it, because like we said, everybody's life is a little fucked. We all have shit. I'm not saying everybody's always projecting, but it's easy to do that. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to get help.
And I want to thank you for saying that, especially as a male. And I want to also share with everyone that men are coming for services more. If I look at my own practice, probably 70% of the people that I see are men. Sometimes they're sent by their partner. My wife sent me, or my girlfriend sent me, my mother sent me. But then it really just takes a life of its own. And I want to say, look, who cares what you're struggling with? You might be struggling with a very serious mental health issue that you want to get help for, and you want to go see a therapist, or you're struggling with basic communication stuff. Who's anybody to say whether they should be in therapy or not? I've had patients that I've worked with who they'll come to me and say, my mom doesn't think I need to be here anymore because I've been coming to you for years, and it's getting a little bit more difficult for me at home, and we'll talk about it. And then we come to the realization, understanding, and I've been doing this for 27 years, so I see it, coming. I know what this is all about, but helping the person in front of me to see it is that when people start to change, when they start making the changes in their life and they're living with other people, the other people are not always happy about these changes because it impacts them and they're not ready for this change. Yeah. Even though they might say to you, we wanted you to go for therapy. We don't kind of like it anymore because we're uncomfortable with the changes you're making because it makes them uncomfortable. It's again like the dominoes. If it forces them to act differently and they're not on board. They're like, your therapist sucks because you're becoming a pain in the ass. We kind of liked you when you were just...
When you were powerless, when you didn't
say anything,
speak up, and
when you didn't speak up.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting bringing up like being around other people. That's something even aside from therapy, like just wanting to better yourself at all. Mm-hmm. Your peers or your family, whoever's your circle, whatever that circle looks like for somebody listening. I've found in my life and I've witnessed in other people's lives where as you try to ascend, if you're trying to do something more, if everybody's right here on this level and I'm trying to do something, whatever, a level above, once I start climbing that ladder, it's either you have to do one or two things if you want to be on the same level as me. You have to either rise as well or you have to pull me back down. And I think a lot of times it's a lot easier for people to just kind of pull you back down. Where they're like, I'm not ready to change yet. Yeah. I'm not ready to climb that ladder yet. So it's a lot easier for me to maybe shake it and get you back down.
Or they support your change. They can say, I don't understand it, but I support it and I see the growth. Yeah. But it takes a very confident person to say that. And sadly, not everybody is... I would hate to say this, but sometimes when you're the one going for therapy, you might lose a lot of people around you because they liked you the way that you were, because it served them well. This new version, updated version of you is not going to serve them well. Like say you were having struggling with alcoholism and everybody in your family drinks. All of a sudden you stop drinking. What do you think that's going to do to the family system? Yeah. They're going to be like, what, you think it's not good enough? We're like, what, you're better than us because you stopped drinking? Are you saying that we have a drinking problem? What's going on
They're
over
projecting.
Here? They're projecting, and they don't like the fact that you're not drinking anymore. We liked you when you were tipsy all the time with us because then we don't have to look in the mirror. I don't have to look at myself in the mirror because if we're all in the same boat, then we're all fine. But if all of a sudden you go for therapy and you're like, I'm not drinking anymore because I realize it's a problem, what does it do for me? Then you're kind of saying you all have a problem and maybe you need to look in the mirror.
It forces them to look in the mirror. It forces them to look
and they don't want to. It's confrontation.
Yeah, it's scary. That's what we talked about this before we went live, and I wanted to definitely get to this today. Speaking of confrontation and family issues, right? Thanksgiving, the holidays are coming up. People got to face those issues now.
Yeah, especially with the election.
The election, people are disagreeing on that, and then other family traumas and whatnot come to play. And
I'm gonna say something that I'm gonna tell people. I'm gonna give you one strong thing to do, a tip to take away for Thanksgiving. And usually all year round, I'm like confront, talk. For Thanksgiving, repress and suppress that shit.
Hide it all.
It does not belong at the Thanksgiving table. Absolutely not. And especially if you're the one hosting, you don't want to trigger people. Why are you inviting people to your house to have a fight? If you are being invited, don't start shit up because nobody's inviting you to have a fight. And with the election stuff, let me just, we've been, how long has this been going on, right?
Too long. We're in a swing state, so it's worse.
Too long, right? Let me just say, you are not going to change anybody's mind, okay? And having a big to-do in front of other people at somebody's Thanksgiving dinner or at a party, you're just embarrassing yourself, okay? And you're making issues for the host. Don't be that person, okay? Believe what you want. Let other people believe what they want. Doesn't matter if you don't agree with it. Thanksgiving or a family party or whatever is not the place to do it. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to survive most Thanksgivings. So
most people. A lot of people are. Actually.
Yeah, I don't need to get into it if I can avoid it.
Well, let me ask you something. So, what makes it difficult for you? Because it is a great time to get together, but again, it's a difficult time because we have to face some people we don't necessarily want to face.
Yeah, I think sometimes the dynamic, like the lack of dynamic or the lack of the relationship I would like these relationships to be is on display. So it's like our lack of closeness is very obvious right now because we have to face it, as you're saying, right? Where it's like we don't have the relationship because maybe at least in my perspective, this person has chosen to not get better when it comes to maybe their alcoholism or their relationship decisions aside from the family or whatever. And or they like there's resentment of the time that maybe we have lost because we don't take time to get together and get to know each other on a level that would be important and impactful. And then we're just sort of like forcing it Thanksgiving, Christmas. And it's like,
well, then I'm going to tell you to do this. Put it on your emotional bookshelf. I talk about the emotional bookshelf in my book. It's not avoidance, okay? Because avoidance is not good. It's short-term gain for long-term loss. We can go into that in more detail too. Put it on your emotional bookshelf. I mean, just imagine. We know what a bookshelf looks like, right? You've got several of them in your studio.
They don't have books, though. They're just Legos.
No, they have cool stuff on them.
Yeah.
But just put it on there. Shelf it for Christmas. Shelf it for the holidays, whether it's Thanksgiving, birthday, whatever it is. Shelf it. It's there. We can take it down another day. Talk about it, work it through if we need to, resolve it if we can to whatever degree, but we don't need to do it for Thanksgiving.
So this
or whatever.
I'll get a little personal here.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Like, right? What if you try to shelve it and they take it off and they open it up and they start reading a chapter to you? What if it's like you're trying to maybe
don't
not
engage.
I don't want to avoid the alcoholism or the issues, right?
Don't engage.
But if someone's messed up.
Don't engage. Are you really going to fix them over Thanksgiving?
No, that's my goal.
No, it's not your goal, right? But I would say to you, don't engage.
Yeah.
You have to be a willing participant
yeah.
for there to be a big fight that's going to happen.
So what do you do in the sense of you can't not see the person because they're going to be upset then, and then you're going to, the repercussions of that.
Right.
But if they're going to participate in the activities that make it impossible for you to.
Well, if we're talking about drinking.
Yeah.
And say it's Thanksgiving dinner, right? So you've shared something personal. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's not a therapy session, but kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I do it every week, so.
Nothing is going to change over that dinner that you're in, right?
Yeah.
So it is their problem. It's not your problem to fix or resolve. This is who they are at this point in their life, at this point in time.
Yeah.
You can take what you can from them and just then walk away. Hopefully there's more than that. Many people at this party, this dinner. You walk away. You go make yourself useful in the kitchen. You go to the bathroom. You help yourself to a dessert, or you say, oh, somebody else, wants my attention. Leave the situation. You have to be a willing participant for that to escalate.
Yeah.
If they're going to escalate it on their own, let them.
Yeah.
You're not in control of them. You're only in control and in charge of yourself.
Yeah.
Focus on yourself and you putting that away on the bookshelf. That's your bookshelf. It's not theirs. They got their own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I will keep that in mind this Thanksgiving. Have you seen that episode of I don't know if you watch what's it called, The Bear at all?
I do.
Did you see the episode with their Thanksgiving episode?
I have not seen that yet.
Oh my God.
I just started to watch it. Tell me.
I think it's called like 13 Fishes or something. Is the name of the episode, but it's there's conversations in that episode. It is so tense, and that whole show.
It's amazing. I love that show.
It's very tense, and it's very
tense. Yeah.
But there's an episode in the second season that is like dives straight into the main character Carmen's like family home.
Yeah.
And it's a flashback, and it explains a lot of or sort of shines light as to why like maybe he is the way that he is, and sort of the stuff he's dealing with with his family. So yeah, I if you watch that episode, I'd love. I mean, I've got you on social media, and I've got your phone number, so we'll text.
But if it's
about
really
it when you
that
get
bad, you also have the choice of not going. But not going is also making a huge statement.
That is a statement,
right?
Yeah.
That's making. So you got to choose which statement do I want to make.
Yeah.
And ultimately, guys, we are in control of our actions, and nobody else is. So don't be so reactive.
Yeah. Did you go? I'm curious. Did you go no contact with your family at all?
I had no contact with my dad for 5 years.
Wow.
He disowned me.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was very difficult.
Yeah.
Because even though I was like, yay, I'm free, I wasn't, because a ghost of my father was always in my mind and with me, because I thought about, oh my gosh, what if he dies? I don't want to be left with unresolved grief. I didn't know. I didn't have the words then, but it was always, I still loved him, and I knew that he loved me. So it made it very difficult. And eventually we did come together after 5 years. He finally accepted me for who I was as much as he could, so we didn't have to have this separation. But I was close to my mom. I have 2 brothers, very close to them, and they served as a liaison people to make it happen. But ultimately, I had to accept also him. I talk about that in the book. It's in, I think, the last chapter. I talk about acceptance. There are certain things, if we want certain people to be in our life, we have to accept.
Yeah.
If I did not accept certain things about my father, we would never be able to have a relationship.
How do you get better at accepting things? How do you get better at accepting people for who they are if it's important to you to have a relationship with them?
I knew that those things would not change in him. So and I wanted him in my life, so I have to accept them. When they got too much for me, I could walk away.
Yeah. So setting up your own guardrails, your own boundaries of like...
My own boundaries to say, okay, I'm visiting you, and now I see that you're kind of escalating, and this might get a little ugly. I would leave before it did. Yeah. Because I knew he would never change, so I'd have to change my reaction to him. One of the most powerful things we have in life, because people often say to me, it's not my choice, it wasn't my fault. I get it. We don't control circumstances always. Sometimes we have our role in it. Sometimes, the other person has a majority of the role in it. Something happens, and then we have a reaction mostly, right?
Yeah.
In that middle space is the most powerful space to be in, which is the pause button. So there's an event, there's circumstances, and there's usually a reaction. It's automatic. Something happens, we react. Something happens, we react. But in that middle space, and I've worked on it myself because I used to be pretty reactive.
Yeah.
There's a pause button. Pause. We don't always have to respond. Yeah. We can step back, we can think about it, and we can be very proactive in our response. That takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of self-awareness because most of us are on autopilot.
Yeah.
We are. Think about it. Last time you got pissed off, angry, whatever, did you even know? Or you're like a projectile. It just kind of boom.
Just happens.
Right?
Yeah.
Just happens.
Yeah.
But we need to stop it and say, okay, wait a minute. What just happened? How do I feel about it? What do I think about it? What am I going to do?
Yeah. Wow. You guys went 5 years.
Yeah.
So no speaking at all, probably.
No contact, but I think my mother. Well, I know that my mom shared facts about me because he was always concerned that I was safe.
Yeah.
But no, I had defied him, and I had left home. And in the Indian culture, if you leave home as an unwed daughter, like you're a slut, you're a whore, you're doing all kinds of terrible things, which I wasn't. I didn't do any of those things. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. I should have partied more, but I didn't. So it was 5 years, and it was while I was in college. And then it just got to the point, so I teach people and I help people learn that, you can cut people out of your life, but are they really gone from you? They're really not. If it's somebody you really love, they're not, because they still reside inside of you. And don't you want to make peace? Yeah. So the peace was just not only for him, it was for myself. Yeah. I didn't want to have that burden.
Yeah, that's something I'm not going to lie to you. I've thought about it a bunch with different relationships that I have with family members, even some friends too, where it's like, I think about just sometimes I really think about how precious and kind of insane life is, where it's like it could just be gone. I have people my age that have just, they're not here anymore, and I have people who don't have both their parents around anymore, and it happens suddenly. And sometimes I think about that and I get scared about it. I'm like, damn, like my relationship with my dad, let's say, or my mom, like isn't where I want it to be, or me and my brother aren't as close as I'd like us to be. And like then when you start to, some guy scared the shit out of me who was on a podcast however long ago, there's some clip of some guy being like, think about how many times a year you see your parents.
I saw that. I love that. And it's
true.
Like,
it is true.
20 times.
Yeah. And it's like, and then you're thinking, and then, and so I try, I'm like, oh, I want to message him, I want to talk to him more, I want to spend time with him. But then like, right there, you have these boundaries and you have these things where it's like, okay, you can't cross this, or I'm not going to spend time with you. And then they cross it and you're like, okay, damn it, now I have to wait, I don't know, whatever amount of time.
Over.
Yeah, to start over. And now I'm like,
over.
I get so resentful and bitter about the time in between, where I'm like, we wasted that. Like we wasted months, we wasted years that we could have had, more memories together.
But your part of it is that you just have to work on yourself.
Yeah.
And get to a place where what's good for you. Does that make any sense? I had to get to a place with my dad where I could say, okay, he's never going to be the father I've always wanted him to be. Yeah. And it's interesting because I was working with one of my patients on this. So we have to grieve that. And that's huge. Yeah. Like my father was never the father I wanted him to be, but he was the best that he could be over the years. And I had to accept that. So there is the grieving process. So I had to mourn all of that. And I knew that he was in the future not going to give me what I needed as a little girl and what I needed as a young woman, as an older woman. So I just accepted that, okay, I'm not going to ever get this. I've grieved that. It's gone. It's very sad. And that sadness still resides within myself.
What does grieving it look like? What is grieving that?
It's a death.
Yeah.
It's a death of this fantasy that I've wanted this dad forever. And when I see that in other people and my girlfriends have it, and still this day I'm like, oh, it must be so nice. Like I can't even imagine that. And I get pissed off. But I think, okay, he wasn't able to do that for me, but he gave me other things. Yeah. So he gave me other things. And I also look at his own life because we do pass from one generation to another. And I know a little bit more about his history. Then I'm like, okay, I understand now more about the man that was my father, not just my father in isolation, and what made him who he was. Yeah.
And I'm sure that helps with the accepting.
Absolutely. And I accept the fact that I'm actually a lot like my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, and does that scare you ever? Or you're walking it a fine line?
I'm kind of proud of it, and I do talk about. And I dedicated the book to my parents, both my parents, and in the acknowledgement not in the acknowledgement, in the dedication, I write something to the effect that I thank my dad for all the years of the sparring because it prepared me for life. Like I wouldn't be the badass bitch that I am today if it wasn't for my dad. My resilience comes from my father. Wow. And I wish it was.
That's a lot of power in that.
It's a lot of power.
You're flipping it.
But it took me a long time to accept it as that. But I think I've never felt like a victim. Yeah. So I feel like, okay, I'm thankful for that. It's made me who I am. I just wish it was packaged differently.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Definitely. Wish it would. It's right? Like the medicine you needed, but maybe it would have been nice if it tasted better.
Form,
yeah, if
right?
it tasted better.
Yeah. So
Okay. So what are some ineffective ways versus maybe effective ways to communicate when it comes to relationships, whether it's platonic friendships or in a romantic sense?
I think we need to put down our phones. I think the phones are, if you and I have a problem, we have an issue, I'm going to say, I want to talk to you about something. Are you free tomorrow at 5 p.m.? Can we sit down and have a conversation with each other? Great for that, right? I can text it to you and you can reply to me and say, yeah, that works, or it doesn't work. And we sit down together and we talk to each other. Yeah. And I think one of the most challenging things in that, because I can get people to do that, but then what happens, right? People say, well, I got to the table, but then it was really fucked in here.
Yeah, then you have to get into it. Yeah.
We have to be able to actively listen. I have to be actively listening to what you're saying. We don't listen, and we think of listening as a passive activity.
People sort of wait for their turn to talk. Yeah,
they're forming their rebuttal while the other person is talking. I'm guilty of that. I'm sure you're guilty of that, right? We're like, okay, when can I get in here so you can shut up and I can say what I need to say?
What do I do if I feel like maybe the other person is, perhaps let's say we're arguing about something, me and you disagree, and maybe it's like a specific detail I get wrong, or one thing that they're holding on to about like the way you said something, as opposed to like they're very aware of what you meant and maybe they don't like the way that made them feel, and now they're holding on to some random detail that you got wrong or you got whatever, and it's like how do you go about working through that communicate?
Well, I think when we talk about right and wrong, now we're leaping into a chapter, there's a part in my book that I talk about, we need to get out of this right and wrong dance, okay? And, I'm sure you've heard this before. Would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? Yeah. We are different. Your perception of something is going to be different to my perception. And I prefer to look at it as a difference rather than right or wrong. And I think that's one of the things we need to do when we're trying to work something out with somebody. They have a reality, you have a reality, and then there's this joint reality between the two of you. If I'm really going to try to understand your experience and actively listen to you, I'm not going to superimpose my reality onto you. I'm not going to tell you what you should think. I'm not going to tell you what you should feel. I'm not going to tell you that your reality should be mine. I literally spend hundreds of hours listening to couples trying to force the other person to believe and only believe their reality, their version of the story. We all have a version of what happens.
Yeah.
You know, like I agree with you that there is objective reality. This is a table. We're not going to argue that it's not a table, right? But when it comes to interpersonal communication and issues, I'm going to experience something different to you, because guess what? My blueprint tells me to experience it a different way.
Working on two different sets
Yours
of plans.
is different too. But as long as I listen to you actively, and I'm actually listening to what you're saying. Most people are not actively listening, like you've said.
Yeah.
That's the place to start. Let me listen to you. Let me listen to your story. And I'm going to ask you clarifying questions to make sure that I actually understand where you're coming from. I'm going to have compassion for you, because we don't approach conversations like this. We basically are like, okay, tell me your version. I'm going to tell you mine, and mine is right.
It is much more like a battle. It feels more combative.
Absolutely.
A lot of times trying to
put
resolve
down the
conflicts.
weapons. It's not a tug of war. Put down the rope. I would say put down the rope. It's exhausting, back and forth and back and forth. What do you want? If you want the relationship to work, if you're really important to me and I'm important to you, we are going to try to work this out. But I'm going to start with a basic thing. That's what I talk about in the book. These are basic things. It's not rocket science. We have 2 ears, right?
Yeah.
But most of us have forgotten how to listen because we are on our phone.
Yeah. Because we're just dumping stuff.
Yeah.
all
And
night
when you're
long.
done, let the other person share what they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah. How do we go from, okay, so let's say, I'm disagreeing with somebody, and the two of us, we're doing a good job at that now. Maybe we've moved into a space where we're both hearing each other.
Yes.
We both have different perspectives on what happened and how it happened.
And you validate each other.
And we're telling, okay, I get that. Now, how do we resolve that? Because there's still someone obviously had an issue, brought an issue to the table that was like, I don't like the way this was said. And then if I come back with, well, this is what I experienced, this is why I said that way, I didn't feel like I said it that way, whatever it is, right? How do you get to resolution in these kind of trickier interpersonal things?
I think that, I've been doing this for 28 years. I think that most interpersonal problems are created by the big 3 M's around needs and expectations. There's a miscommunication of needs and expectations. There is a misinterpretation of needs and expectations, and there is a mismanagement of needs and expectations. If you know what I expect on something, then I expect you to follow through on it. Manage it well, communicate it well, and hopefully through good discussions, there's no misinterpretation. It's when something doesn't go our way, we are disappointed. My need was not met. It's not what I expected you to do. I thought you would do this. And then when I talk to over, so many conversations, and even in my own personal life, people generally don't talk about needs and expectations. And I think absolutely we need to have a conversation about what our needs and expectations are. And in the book, I highlight 5 things. After doing therapy for so many years with so many people, so many couples, so many individuals, they generally revolve around emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, finances, parenting, anything else? Division of time and labor. So when we talk about emotional intimacy, people think, well, that's sex. No, it's not. It's being emotionally naked to your partner. Physical intimacy, it's not just sex. It's all the non-sexual touch that should happen in a relationship. Finances, oh my God, that's as hard as sex. Yeah. People don't want to. What are your expectations financially? We've never discussed them ever. I don't even know how much he makes, she makes, what comes in, what goes out. Yeah. Division of time and labor. A lot of people are like this today. Literally, I can go to a restaurant. You can go. Everybody's looking at their phone. How do we spend our time, and how do we divide up our time? How do we do all of that? If we're not be able to have a clear conversation about what do we expect? And parenting, if you have children, of course.
Yeah. So to have a partnership work, sort of being on a similar page in those 5 aspects would
talk about them. Yeah. We're never, we're not mirror images of the other person. It's when we think we are, like you should expect what I expect, and you should know that. I often hear that he should know that about me. No, because when you met, you were in your 20s, and now you're 50 or 40, your expectations have changed, but you're operating on the ones that you met when you were 21. I'm not the same person I was when I was 21. I'm 55.
Yeah.
My expectations and my needs have changed. But if I don't have this conversation with my partner, how is that going to be a setup for success? It's going to be absolutely a setup for failure. And that's going to erode at what I believe is a cornerstone of all healthy relationships, which is emotional intimacy. If we cannot connect with each other, by the way, the most common problem people come to me for, I feel disconnected from my partner. I don't feel close anymore. Yeah. And that absolutely erodes the physical part and all the other things I just mentioned. If I don't feel close to you, I'm not going to want to talk to you about anything, whether it's money, sex, or children, or whatever. I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be hard.
And this hasn't helped.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
This has not helped.
It's an escape. It's an easy way I can do the avoidance, right? If I have more things at my disposal to avoid.
Well, we are more concerned about connecting virtually with strangers than we are with the person sitting across from us, our most significant partner. And, people say to me, Anita, now that you've told me what my issue is, that I'm suffering from emotional intimacy, what do I do? How? We want a takeaway. What do you think that is? It's not a test, but what do you think? How are we going to connect if I'm feeling disconnected from you?
I mean, I think you just have to talk. I think that's
spend time with me.
Yeah.
Spend time with
real
me.
Time.
Yeah, real time, but not time. Well, people say, yeah, we were just sitting on the couch together. And no, she was over there. You were over there. You were on your phone. She was on her social media. That's not spending quality time together. The only way you're going to start building and nurturing and maintaining emotional intimacy in your relationship is quality time. Let's do something that's fun.
Yeah. What's something you like to do that helps build that?
What do I like to do?
Yeah.
I like to go for long walks. I like to run. I like to do lots of stuff. I'm a pretty active person.
I'm pretty down with long walks.
Yeah,
those are
walks.
Pretty great, especially if you got to talk.
And I can walk for miles, 12, 10, 15 miles. Yeah. Just spending time talking and putting the phone away. Get off your social media. Stop trying to connect. We're the most connected. Really, we globally are the most connected right now.
Yeah.
But we are the least emotionally connected. These connections are not deep. They're shallow.
Yeah.
Stop collecting numbers and friends and start building with the people that are in your life for real.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. That actually kind of takes me to something I wanted to ask you about. So this was in doing a little bit of prep for the show.
Yeah.
According to the Pew Research Center, about 40% of Americans right now consider that they say that they long for a closeness with their friends and their friendships.
Yeah.
They don't feel close to the people that are around them, whether it's family or friendships. About 40% of just Americans.
Is that sad?
That is sad.
Yeah.
I mean, that's damn near most of it. I mean, we're getting close to 50%.
And I think there are people who probably lied. Because I tell you, loneliness. We are a nation of lonely people. We might fool ourselves by being friends on people on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But we are social creatures. We need connections, real life connections. We are meant to have people in our life. We need to get out of our houses, apartments, wherever you are. Go and be active in your community. Do something. And I know people, after COVID, there was like so much sensitivity to how do I reintegrate back into society. Yeah. And especially with a lot of college age students that I worked with, including my own children, they're like, I don't want to go back out there. It's so weird to go back out there. But you have to take the first step. And I know it can be really difficult. Yeah. But just join something, do something. That's part of, and this whole, being on the phone and virtually having a lot of friends, in some way keeps you in your box. Get out of your box. Go out into the real world.
When you start maybe meeting people and like maybe building like whether it is a network, whether it's through online or it's maybe coworkers or people in a space, if you're volunteering or something in the community, we're talking about so many Americans feel a lack of closeness. Maybe they have friends that they would consider friends or people in their lives that they talk to regularly, but they don't feel close. How do you think we can, now that maybe if let's say I have those people, I'm going outside, I'm trying to be around at these places, how do I work to build the closeness with people? How can we build closeness with people that we don't have it yet with?
Ask questions. If I'm in a room of 10 people, I'm going to think, okay, I'm going to try to get to know one or two people by asking them questions. People generally like to talk about themselves. Yeah. And I want to walk away with something. I want to walk away with a phone number. I'm dating myself, right? Snapchat address, whatever it is. Walk away with something and some information about somebody else, and also share something about you. But don't just talk about yourself and what you do. And I'm gonna say, don't always ask people what they do. Why? We need to put people in a category. Ask them what they like. What did you do for fun? What movies? What restaurants? Have a conversation with somebody. Get to know someone else.
I think that's great advice. I think that's something. I mean, I know that's sort of that is the first step, I guess.
It's
right?
The first step.
That's the first step in building that closeness. How do you maintain close relationships, close friendships? Let's specify it.
Friendships are probably one of the most important relationships we have to have in our lives. Our significant other, that's great, but they don't fulfill all of us. You know, all parts of I think we are very complicated beings. I can speak for myself and people I've worked with. Our partner will fulfill certain needs and expectations, but they can't fulfill all of them. And it's not really fair to expect that from our partner because we're complicated. We have various needs and expectations. And I love the fact that I have some girlfriends I can go to have those needs and expectations met. And then I come back to my partner and I feel whole again. I feel like, okay, I'm an integrated self. We need to maintain our friendships by spending time with them. You know, some people, I don't know if you know, I've had this experience too. They start dating somebody and all of a sudden they're gone.
Drop off the face of the planet.
They're gone.
And then they break up.
Then they break up and
back.
Guess what? They're back, right? So pay attention to your friends. Spend some time with your friends. And I know we are a nation so busy. Take a day out of a month, but send a text. I always text my friends. Heart. Doesn't have to be words, but a heart says everything. Flower emoji says it all. Keep doing fun things with them. Like if you're playing tennis or whatever it is that you're doing, maintain those activities. And what you're talking, you know, you're bringing, I talked about this on my own podcast, which is how do you maintain individuality within a coupleship? Because lots of people feel that if they're in a relationship, now they've got to abandon their friends. They can't do all the things that they used to do. Perhaps, you might have to minimize some of them, but you can still maintain them. You can still do some of the things that you enjoyed doing on your own without feeling like it's going to be a threat to the relationship. And I'll tell you something, if it is and you feel like that, then you got to have that conversation with your partner. You need to be able to have a sense of identity, a sense of who you are that's separate. And society, I have to say, you know, we kind of get screwed because when people get together, think about what's promoted, a oneness. There is a union, merging of two people. There isn't. That's bullshit. That's set up for failure because it's two identities coming together to form a relationship. And in a healthy relationship, there has to be room for both identities to exist. But when we think about marriage, we think about cohabitation, there's a oneness. And we all, you know, people do, they strive to have that. I shouldn't say we all do. With maturity, and I hope with some good therapy and some realization that, wait a minute, you be you, I be me, and we come together. It's unhealthy to try to think that you got to do everything the other person's doing. Yeah,
I've seen that. I've seen that of friends of mine where they're dating a chick and like she all of a sudden, like she either they drop off the face of the planet and I don't see him anymore. Or vice versa. Maybe, you know, she has no friends now. Like all of a sudden, like she's attached to his hip and it's like anytime I want to hang out with a dude, she's coming with him and it's like, okay, like that's cool. I'm glad she's here, but like I was kind of,
you're not really needed here.
Yeah, you know? I kind of asked you to hang out. I wish I would have got a heads up, maybe.
Right,
that she was
boundaries.
Yeah, you know? So that can be interesting. But yeah, I think that I'd have to agree.
We have to maintain friendships.
Yeah.
And you know what? I always say to people, if you have one or two good friends, you're lucky.
Yeah.
You don't need the whole circle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, even just having and maintaining one or two friendships can be difficult sometimes.
Yeah, you know? You have to, you know, friendships. At my age, been in and out of many friendships, right? And learning who's my real friend, who's a true friend, and what does that really mean? And that changes over time, of course. And sometimes it's just adjusting expectations. Clients will sometimes say to me, Anita, this person did this, and I'm so disappointed, I'm so hurt, and I don't really want them out of my life, but I don't know what to do with this. adjust your expectations of them, put them in a different box.
Yeah.
You used to be up here where I thought, we're really close, emotional intimacy is super high.
Yeah.
But after what happened the last couple of years, you're kind of over here. You're still in my life, but I've adjusted my expectations of you and our friendship.
Yeah. I think that's like a super powerful thing to do that I know I've had to do in my own life, where I've had friendships, for instance, where I felt like I kept being let down by them. Like I was like, man, like I really needed you to show up for me. Like you blew me off, or you're not answering my phone call. Like, dude, like we used to talk every day, like da 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 da. And there's just times where it's like, okay, I still love that person, I still care about that person, but it's like, all right, I'm not gonna ask you for this every week, every month, or whatever. Like I'm gonna see you when I see you, and I'm gonna be excited to do that, but I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna try to make it something it isn't, because obviously it isn't from their perspective. So
you're just getting hurt and disappointed.
Yeah. I wanna ask too. How have you been able to maintain closeness in the friendships you do have, especially like you've gone through, like you've had partnerships, you have kids. Like how do you maintain friendships?
I check in on my friends. I have 2 really close friends, and sometimes there's a span of time where we don't talk much, but I usually send them an emoji or something every other day, if not every day, to remind them that I'm still there. And it doesn't take much. And every day might be too much, or we send each other a joke or something. Do it every other day. Do it once a week if you want to, but you have to maintain that time. You have to nurture those relationships that are important to you, and spending time with them, whether it's virtually, if you can't be with them. I can't always get together with one of my closest friends. She lives like an hour out, but we talk. And it might just be literally, sometimes our conversations are, I call her on my way to work. She calls me. Okay, gotta go. Or she hangs up on me. I don't take it personally. Oh my God,
yeah.
It's these moments that we steal to, just to say, hey, how's it going? You doing good? Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Just checking in with each other to make sure that we're okay. It can't just be that I just hit you up when I need you, when I'm struggling, because that doesn't work. It's not reciprocated. Yeah. And people will say, oh, Anita, I don't need anything. I just keep. Reciprocity is needed in all relationships, friendships especially. If I'm always loading on you, guess what's going to happen over time? You're going to be like, shit, there's no room in this relationship for my shit, because you take up all the space, and you might end up feeling bad, guilty, and start to back up a bit. Yeah. I have to be there for you as you are there for me. Reciprocity. Yeah,
definitely. I think we've all had a friend before where it's like, anytime you see them, they're just like ready to dump it all on you.
It's like, all about them,
dude,
right?
Yeah, you're like, damn, and like
you're sucking it on.
You can only say, damn, that's crazy so many times before you're just like trying to walk out the door. You're like, damn, that's crazy. Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, you're out the door, right?
I can't do this anymore.
But then it's, setting those boundaries with that person and being able to say, again, adjusting expectations, right?
Yeah.
It's not that type of friendship anymore. And if you really care and you want the friendship to remain at that emotional intimacy level, then you can say, listen, I love you, but, some of the time it's all about you. What about asking me how I'm doing?
Yeah.
And if they have any kind of self-awareness, they'll be like, oh my God, you're right. That's all I ever do is dump on you. I'm so sorry. I'm going to work on this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of comes back to everything starts with the conversation, right? Having that conversation is powerful. What's maybe the biggest mistake you've ever made in a relationship? Something that you can reflect on now, being like, oh, I wish I could have handled that better.
That's hard to say. I've probably fucked up a lot of things.
Yeah. As we all have.
Biggest mistake, gosh, there's too many.
Or something you think people could learn from, a mistake you made in the past, maybe a friendship.
Probably trust. I think trust is a big issue, and I think I've sometimes trusted the wrong people, and then I have to think, wait a minute, what was my role in this?
Yeah, are you too quick to trust, or?
I'm too quick to trust.
Yeah, I have the same issue.
Yeah, too quick to trust. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and then when you kind of do something, I'm better at it now at 55 than obviously when I was younger. Probably that I'm too giving and too open. Like, if I grew up in a family, despite all the fucked up issues in my household, Indian culture, we're very open. Like, everybody come in, everybody eat, everybody whatever. Yeah. And then I'm like, wait a minute, where's all my invites? I'm the one hosting all the parties, doing all the giving. Who's going to give back to me? And this is where I bring in the ledger. People say, well, I don't have a ledger. I'm like, we all have a ledger. We all have an unconscious ledger. If I'm the one constantly giving, I'm going to eventually feel depleted and I'm going to want something back. I was too generous, too giving of myself. And then when I didn't get it back, I would be resentful and upset and angry.
Yeah.
And I just learned over time that I need to adjust that. Like
adjust
I need
the
to
amount you're giving.
Yeah,
right?
adjust what I'm giving and give it to a select few.
Yeah.
The smaller, so the circle is getting smaller and tighter.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned.
That's something that is, I've definitely had similar experiences, right? Where it's like that resentment comes a lot of times because I feel a lot of resentment and bitterness in certain relationships that I have or that I've had in the past. And it's because it's like I feel like I'm giving X and I'm only getting back Y. Yeah. And I'm like, well, how can you not also give me X, you know? And then you get mad at them, but it's like, but that's not their, you know, I kind of, as we're touching on in this conversation, is like, that's not on them. I can only control, I can't force them to give me X if they don't want to give me X.
They don't want to. And I grew up like that. My parents were, you know, they weren't very well off at all, but we always had tons of food. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My friends would all come over. We would eat. You know, she'd always have dinner ready, right, no matter what time. And then I have a very open door policy. You know, at a swimming pool, people came in and out. And then over time, like, wait a minute, it's the same thing. Like, why am I not getting anything back? But I had to work on myself. I'm like, why am I giving so much? What is going on inside of me? Because, you know, we can get upset with everybody and say, well, I have to look at myself and say, what's going on with me that I feel I have to give so much? Is it because I'm not loving myself enough that I have to give so much to get something back?
Because you feel like you don't deserve to just be celebrated for you, so you're like, I got to throw this party. I got to give this guy
So I don't
gift.
do that anymore. Tighter, smaller.
I respect that a bunch. This is something I have an issue with all the time. I feel like I'm maybe trying too hard to help people sometimes. Yeah. Like, you ever like have like maybe a friend that's on hard times or that's going through something, and I value and I'm like proud to be somebody that people will come to like in their lives. Like I have a lot of people in, I guess, my network or friendships that like will come to me when they're in a tough spot. You know, maybe they're getting kicked out of their place for a couple of weeks and they need a place to crash, or they're asking me for advice on this or that or whatever, which is great. But then sometimes it gets to a place where, you know, you do offer a helping hand, or you do, you know, try to extend gratitude or help to this person, right? And then it doesn't work out, and then there's sort of like they're still like doing the same activities to themselves. They're still hurting themselves over and over again. They're making the same mistakes. Yeah. And you're just like trying and trying and trying. How do you avoid, I guess, that pitfall? Because it starts in a great place, and everybody's going to fall in hard times. Good relationships, you're going to have to be there for people when things aren't going well for them. I get that. But if and when they continue to hurt themselves in a way that's almost now going to start hurting you.
Well, yeah, and then it sounds like it's an enabling thing.
Yeah, right? That's what it's doing, essentially.
Yeah, you're enabling them. Yeah. And then you have to put them away and think about, what is going on with me? What is this triggering inside of me that I keep doing this? You know, they got their shit, they're doing their thing, and I can't fix any of that. I can try to help, but what is it that I feel I have to do it to a detriment to myself?
Yeah, like, why do I want to help
It's
this
protecting
person so
your emotional boundaries.
Yeah.
So then you got to go within and try to figure out what that is about you. Do you have a rescue fantasy? And some people do. They have a rescue fantasy. They have to rescue the world. It's giving that up and realizing that you can't rescue the world. The only person really you can rescue is yourself. And work on yourself. And if it's a pattern, then it's you. Then you've got to work on that and say, okay, I need to stop doing this. There's a difference between helping somebody and enabling somebody. And if you're repeatedly doing it and they're continuing their behavior, that's enabling, and that's not helping.
What is a rescue fantasy that you said there?
Rescue fantasy, that I always want to help somebody. That no matter what, I'm going to do it to a detriment.
Like, I'm the one that can fix this.
Yes, I'm the one who can fix this. And I have to reflect back on, maybe I just need to fix myself. And, you know, maybe I was in my childhood waiting for somebody to rescue me, and they never did. So now I feel I have to rescue the world, but I really just have to rescue myself. I can help, but there's a difference, again, between helping and enabling.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of people, I know myself included, I've definitely had those thoughts before, where I noticed that I am sometimes, you mentioned you give people the benefit of the doubt a lot. Sometimes I feel like maybe those things weren't awarded to me growing up, or certain parts of my life. So then I tend to maybe do it too much. You overdo it, you know, where you're giving people chance after chance after chance. How can people find what they want to do? if they don't know what they want to do, right? Maybe they're in a place where their life is fucked and they're looking to unfuck it, but they don't even know what direction to go. Like, they don't know what they want. They don't have a thing that they want to do in life.
I think they should call a therapist.
What are they going to find in therapy, you think, that will, because I have people that are friends of mine too that don't believe in therapy, don't want to do it, right?
That's okay.
And if they're listening to this clip of us being like, okay, you're admitting to me that you don't know what you want to do, we're telling them to go do therapy. Why?
The therapeutic relationship is a very interesting and unique relationship. And people are going to say, well, you're biased, you're a therapist. I wasn't always a therapist. I was a patient first.
Yeah.
And when I spent enough time with my therapist, I was able to value it in a sense that it helped me to discover so many things about myself, my relationships, and what I wanted to do with my life that I don't think I could have done in another kind of relationship. Friendships are different. Everybody has their goals, their agendas, their biases. I'm not saying therapists don't. We do. But it is the only place you can go to talk about whatever the fuck is going on in your mind. If you spend enough time with your therapist and you build enough trust, you can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about, and that will guide you and help you to explore where it is you need to go. And of course, it depends on where you are in your life, right? Mm-hmm. If you're 20, it's going to be very different to when you're 50. Yeah. So I wholeheartedly believe in the therapeutic process to help people figure out their shit, whatever that shit may be. Yeah. And guys listening today, if you're thinking about it, don't just think about it. Go and have an experience. And do shop around, buyer beware. There are good therapists and bad therapists, and I'm not the one to decide that for you, but you will feel it when you're sitting across the room from somebody, whether this is going to be a good fit for you. Yeah. The ultimate vehicle of change is the therapeutic relationship. Yeah. If you have a good connection, if you have a good fit with your therapist, you are going to go places with that person that you've never gone to before in your life. I had this amazing experience with Dr. Frank, but honestly, I didn't really get into the process until about a year. Now, I'm not saying that's what it takes most people. Some people, it takes less time or maybe longer, but I stuck with it long enough that now looking back, it's one of the most significant relationships of my life. And I still today sometimes go, oh yeah, that's what he was talking about, and I reflect back on it today.
Well, and what do you think is like a good general rule of thumb for maybe somebody who's listening to this and they're thinking about starting therapy, if they get with a therapist and they're not sure if it's working or clicking right away? How many sessions would you think would be like a general rule of thumb where it's like, okay, if it's 3-4 sessions, it's not really clicking, maybe now it's time to try something else?
I think 2. I have a feeling within the first session, and from my experience, most patients do, clients do. I usually say, why don't you go home and think about our experience together, and if you felt good in the session, call me, and then we'll make another appointment. Yeah. But I'm going to say, if you're a person who's saying, oh, of course Anita's saying that, I don't want to go for therapy, but I'm kind of lost. Well, I think that writing down what your thoughts and feelings are is also a good way to do it. Writing things down helps you to structure thoughts and feelings. And I say, don't just write them down, read them back to yourself. It's a very different way of processing information. Yeah. And by now, as you know from the title of my book, I'm not a hokey pokey kind of therapist. I'm pretty direct, pretty forward and confrontational, but I'm also empathic and all that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately, to lead to a place of change, we need to be concrete in what we want to do. And writing things down, even for myself, I write things down. I'm a big list person. I'm a big deadline person, right? Because otherwise it's overwhelming. To me, it's like looking at the ocean and not seeing anything above. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. But if you can take out a book and write some things down about what you think you want to do, then over time you can refine some of those ideas, some of those thoughts, some of those feelings. But again, go see a therapist. And if you might be thinking, oh my God, therapy is too expensive for me, go to a training institute. When I did my training, it was all on a sliding fee scale. I saw people for $10 an hour. I saw people for $50 an hour. Yeah. And people say, well, I don't want to trust my life to some intern. But I'll tell you something. That intern has 5 other people, okay, helping them. They have a supervisor individually supervising the session. You're going to sign a whole bunch of forms. It's going to be confidential. It's going to stay within that training institute. But it's going to be great because that student is not jaded. They're ready to go and they're ready to help you. And they want to help you. I remember being in a very young intern, and I was working with my first couple, and they said, what do you know? You don't even look like you're married or anything. And I wasn't at the time. And the husband walked out of the room. But he came back in, and I told him all about the process because they have to sign all these forms. Trust the process if you're going to an institution like that. There's great supervision going on over there. But you know what? I think most people can afford therapy. They just don't want to. They don't want to put their money there because they think, well, what am I going to get at the end of it?
It's not an immediate thing.
They don't have a concrete thing to hold in their hand. But I'll tell you something. It'll be the best money that you've ever spent in your life. It is not fleeting. And I love shoes. I love all kinds of stuff like fashion. Yeah. But I would rather spend that money, and I'm so glad I did on Dr. Frank, than anything else because that experience still stays with me. It's not something that's fleeting. Yeah. And I always think people can find the funds if they really want to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you just need.
It's an investment in yourself.
Yeah, it is. It's an investment in yourself. It's the same way you don't have to eat the best foods all the time, right? But if you don't, it's going to catch up to you. And I think the same thing where you don't have to invest in your mental health or your emotional health.
Mental health is so important.
It's going to catch up to you.
I just want to say, and thank you for having me on the show. Every chance that I get to talk about mental health and relationships, I love it because I believe that we neglect our mental health. We neglect that, hence our relationships, because our mental health hinges on the quality of our relationships. Think about that. People sometimes come to me and they tell me about their suffering and their mind, and I believe the mind hurts. Yeah. When we're not doing well, our mind hurts. When we hurt our foot hurts. Our mind hurts. I want everyone to think about that. Our mind can be in pain. And then they'll go on to tell me about some stories, and then I think, oh, their relationship is falling apart. They're upset with their mother or whoever, but they don't make the connection that they're upset, their mind is hurting because their relationships are not working. Think about it. And I'll tell you, most people who sit in my office are talking to me about some relationship that has gone wrong. And that is what is causing them all the issues that they're having. Yeah. And it takes me back to, when I was doing graduate school, and one of the professors said to me, he was teaching us something, and I thought, I love this phrase. People's issues are caused by the mismanagement of people by people. Somebody somewhere has mismanaged you in your life that you're struggling with these issues. And I'm like, absolutely. Nobody sits in front of me and just talks about themselves. They don't. They're talking about a relationship, whether it's with their parents, their siblings, or coworkers, that's causing them stress. And we need a place to go. If you're not feeling well, you go to the doctor. So what's the shame if your mental health is not well that you go see a professional to help you with that? There's still stigma around it.
Yeah, it is. It is sad. I do think it's lessening. I think more people are being open about it, which I think is a good thing. But we have to just keep.
Keep talking about it. And thank you for doing this podcast. Yeah. And I think especially men have to keep talking about it, promoting it, because it is still something normal and healthy that women do. And even though more men are coming for therapy, it still carries a lot of shame in terms of we're supposed to be all alpha, and alpha men don't go for therapy and all that kind of garbage.
Yeah, and you mentioned too in there about writing down stuff. Journaling has been big for me. That's something I picked up in the last few years, and doing that, just having a space and a time, whether it's the same time. For me, I do it the same time every day. Yeah. But if if it doesn't work out like that for somebody else, just having the ability to see your thoughts outside of your head.
Yes.
For me, there's a lot of power in that because it clears my mind, where it's it's all up here. It's just racing around. Especially, I know a lot of people struggle with racing thoughts, anxious thoughts, right?
It needs to come out.
You got to get those out.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to see them and make sense of them if you can put them on paper.
Yeah. We need to, and we are a nation of anxiety, right? A generation, everybody's anxious today. Yeah. And what does that really mean? Anxiety is a healthy form of anxiety. We need it, right? I had some anxiety about coming onto here, but it's health anxiety. What it does, it forces me to prepare. I have to think about it a little bit, but it's not debilitating anxiety. It's not excessive worry. It's not excessive fear that's persistent and very intense. When we have that, that's debilitating. When things like that start to because people often say, well, how do I know that I need help? You know you need to get help when it starts to interfere with your social functioning, your emotional functioning, your vocational functioning, like you can't go to work, and your relational functioning. When you have a cluster of things that start to happen and break down, then you do need to get some help. But if you have just, you're feeling anxiety because you have a race or something you're preparing for, that's
big interview
healthy.
coming up, that's good
normal.
anxiety, right?
It's
Yeah,
good
that's
anxiety.
normal.
We are wired. We are hardwired for anxiety.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. This is something that I hear and see a lot online, and I want to get your take as a therapist on it. People do this all the time when they go, if I just had a boyfriend or if I just had a girlfriend, then I would be happy. Like, oh, like they're struggling, they're upset all the time. Maybe they feel depressed, and they're like, if I just had somebody, then I would feel better.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
You're not going to. You're looking for some magic formula or magic person to fix you or fix whatever is going on with you. You're just going to extend, repress, or project your issues onto that person. You need to work on yourself before you play in the playground with somebody else. That's what I talk about in my book. The first chapter is self-awareness. Ask yourself, what is going on with you that you have to say that to yourself? If only I had a boyfriend. If only I was skinnier. If only I could fit into this dress. If only we had a baby, we would be happier. No. What is it that you're trying to fulfill within yourself? You're empty somehow, and you have to fill that up within yourself. Nobody's going to be able to do that for you. No person, no baby, no nothing.
Yeah, the baby one scares me, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, down. Yeah,
I know people that do that shit.
No,
that shit freaks me out.
You are just,
man.
babies, okay, challenge the healthiest of relationships. You don't need to bring, and I've seen couples do this. We're just going to have a baby, Anita. I'm like, what the fuck? You were on the divorce's door 2 weeks ago. Now you're going to have a fucking baby? Are you fucking serious? It's not. It's going to create more problems. If you find, and thank you for saying that, if you find yourself saying this phrase, if I only had blank, 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 stop. Okay? Stop with the if I only had. Change it to, what am I looking to fulfill within myself? What is it?
Yeah, I could never, I see it from men and women where they're just like, they're on shaky ground. And then it's like,
let's have a baby.
Let's have a baby.
It's called, we want to avoid our problem. But guess what? That problem's coming back. It's a relational cancer.
You're going to carry
this is what I call it.
However many pounds of that problem
and then you bring
months.
a poor child into your issues, right? Then it gets even more fucked up and ugly.
I will never know what it's like to carry a child, but I could imagine if I was on the outs with somebody and then my solution was let me carry around some extra weight. While still hating them for 9 months, is not going to be happy.
Let me tell you something, guys. That solution will become a part of the problem tenfold. Okay, you cannot do these things. I call it relational cancer, and it will fucking metastasize throughout your relationship. Figure out what's going on with you before you decide to add somebody else into your fucked up life.
Just pull out.
Try to unfucking out. Exactly. Pull out, use a condom. But try to work on yourself. A self-awareness. I keep saying this, and I know we hear the word all over the place, books, plethora of magazine articles, all that kind of stuff. Work on yourself. Be aware of what your triggers are. Be aware of your issues. And once you're aware of them as much as we can be, then you can play in the playground of healthy relationships. And, all relationships have problems. There's no such thing as a perfect relationships. And people say, well, we don't fight. I'm like, well, that's fucked up. You should fight. You need to have a good fight because silence is a killer too. Fighting is healthy. It's normal. It's how we fight. Because intimacy, if you don't know, I'm going to fucking tell you, intimacy breeds conflict in every relationship. The closer we get to somebody, we are going to have a conflict. But it's how we resolve that conflict. A conflict is a good thing. It means I'm actually being my true self.
And you're being yours.
You be yourself. And at some point, we disagree on something. But how are we going to dance around this conflict? Are you going to listen to me? Are we going to listen to each other? And if we handle that well, guess what? Our emotional intimacy is going to go up. But if we don't handle it well, it's going to go down or it's just going to stay. It's an opportunity for a relationship to grow. Think of all the relationships that you've had. Of course, at the beginning, it's a honeymoon phase. Every best foot forward, you choose the restaurants. Oh, everything's fabulous. But when you really say what you think and feel and there's a conflict,
Yeah.
think of that conflict as an opportunity for growth.
The conflict for my gym bros out there, it's like you going, it's like you hitting the bench press, right? You fighting with your girl, right? You get in an argument is like you building muscle. You're building muscles of that relationship in a way, right? If you handle it correctly. You don't want to go in for the deadlift, you know, with the back arched like that. We don't want that. We need you got to work it the right way. You got to talk to each other. You got to listen to each other. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Healthy mental gymnastics.
Yeah. You told me this sort of before we went live, and I want to ask you about it. It's a little off the wall here.
Yeah.
You said something to me about foot fetishes.
Oh,
let's
talk.
People love your feet. It's what you said to me before we went live. What is
yeah,
up
we
with,
were
what
talking.
is up with
well,
that?
it was on my Instagram, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, what's up with that? The origin of that is, so when I started doing social media and, you know, came up with my brand and moniker, Ask Anita, Astley, one day I was sitting outside. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so fed up of taking selfie. I mean, I don't like to take pictures of myself, but it's part of, you know, social media. You got to do stuff. And I am the brand, by the way. So people who say to me, oh my God, it's always a picture of you.
You got to. That's what, dude, I think you gave
You're
me this before we went live.
Yeah.
Look, check this out.
My feet are on there.
There we go. The feet are on there.
Anita, you're so narcissistic.
I'm like, you're on WikiFeet? Do you have a WikiFeet rating, you think?
I don't know. Maybe I should get one.
We
but
should find out, yeah.
It was very innocent, okay? Yeah. So I decided, I don't want to fucking put my face on there. I'm so fed up with this face and my hair is all over the place. I just put a picture of my feet, not thinking anything of it. This was like 4 years.
You knew what you were doing.
No, I didn't. Now I do. Okay. Absolutely. Everything is intentional, okay? I didn't know that I would attract this whole foot fetish community. I actually didn't know much about it, and I've always hated my feet because I thought they were ugly. Yeah. So I'm going to thank all my feet-loving people for, you know, sending me all great vibes when I post a picture. Yeah, I finally love my feet. So then I thought, oh, this is so interesting. I did not know about this. And then it kind of grew into, let me do Instagram Live on foot fetish. You know, what are fetishes all about? And podophilia, by the way, #1 fetish. And what did you call it? A podophilia. That's what it's called. That's a clinical name.
Okay, it sounded really close to something else.
And okay, not pedophilia. And I just want to say, I don't have a foot fetish. Yeah. But I also want to share that I'm Indian. In the Indian culture, feet are not sexual. They actually represent wisdom. And when you come across somebody who's older than you, and I grew up like this, by the way, you touch their feet. Whoa. It's in honor of all your wisdom will now be transferred to me. And Indian people, by the way, don't wear shoes. We love to be barefoot. Yeah. So I got a lot of flack on my Instagram page. Oh, my God, you're just doing this for that. I'm like, I live a barefoot fucking life. If you guys get aroused on this, well, good for you. I'm happy for you. But I'm not doing to titillate you. But now I might actually do it to titillate you.
That's interesting. So, okay, so if wisdom is passed through, what does that mean when people like want to suck toes and shit?
Well, like, it's not sexual. No, that's just sexual.
Okay. So no wisdom.
No wisdom in there. But I want to, the T-shirt that you're talking about. Yeah. So going.
Pull it up one more time.
Yeah. So this was a picture that I took. I just come out of the shower. Took a, quick, here I go. I have to feed the social media. And then somebody, one of my, now I'm friends with this person, is a designer in Paris. And I was so privileged and flattered. He took the picture and he put it on a T-shirt. And then he sent me this T-shirt. And then I posted on social media. And everybody's like, oh, my God, I want this T-shirt. I'm like, okay. So I got a whole bunch of T-shirts printed. I have a whole bunch of them. I give them away with my book sometimes. Yeah. So I don't have a foot fetish. But I also, now that you brought it up. Yeah. There is a huge difference between a fetish and an admiration. Let's talk about that.
Oh, okay.
You want to?
Yeah, what's the difference? Sure, yeah, we can get to it.
Okay. A fetish, guys, is a clinical term, okay? A fetish is when you need that fetish item, like the foot, if you have a fetish of the feet, to get aroused and complete your arousal. Without that coveted fetish item, it doesn't happen. So people say, oh, thank you for doing, because I did a whole show on it. You guys, and there are people, by the way, when we stop laughing and giggling about it, where they have a foot fetish, and I've had many messages from men. Okay. Anita, thank you so much. I hate to say it, guys. Yeah. It's usually men who have said, thank you so much for doing that, because people think we're perverts, people think we're weird, but I've had a foot fetish, and and I haven't told my wife. I'm 55 years old, and it's not in the bedroom. It's a huge problem. Like, after we get through all the ha ha ha, it's a serious problem for some people
Yeah.
because their partner doesn't understand it and they're too ashamed to actually explain it. And then we say, well, why do I have this foot fetish? I don't want to get too clinical on this, but from my understanding of it and my clinical perspective is that when we're and if I'm listening to people after this, who shared stories, is before you're even aware of your sexuality, say it was you, we'll use you as an example.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
You have a babysitter, right? The
Okay.
babysitter comes over and you're like pubescent, not even, you're 4 or 5. She sits on you. She starts playing, she puts her little toes in your mouth and blah, blah, blah. You don't tell your mommy.
That's
she
a
keeps coming.
Freaky ass
No, wait a
babysitter.
minute. Wait. And this happens to you repeatedly.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you are actually being aroused, getting aroused. Before you are even aware of your sexuality, the two become paired mentally. So arousal becomes paired with foot in mouth. This happens on a very unconscious level. It's a very cognitive behavioral explanation of the issue. And I've listened to hundreds of stories after this whole foot thing on my page that, I usut to have a babysitter or I used to have an aunt. She's my aunt. She'd like put her feet on my, and they become paired. So our brain is an amazing thing, how the two become associated. And as men, teenagers, as you start to see feet and you start to get aroused, and then you're ashamed to tell anybody about it. But it's a legit thing. It's not funny. You feel like, oh my God, I just want to be, normal, whatever that means. But now I need to have the foot there. And then, the partner, when they have come clean and says, I have this foot, and when the partner says, okay, we can kind of play around with this, the partner over time can become resentful. It's all about your fetish. What about me? What do I need?
Like you need that. Like I'm not enough to get
Listen,
you
we
up.
could do a whole episode on fetishes and feet and
maybe
stuff.
we will someday. Maybe
but
we
I
will.
just wanted to explain.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm glad you did.
I don't have one, but I have no judgment towards people who do.
Yeah.
And I've been asked, can you start a foot page? I kind of thought about it. I'm like, nah, that's really not my dream to be a foot queen. But
well, you know what, guys? If you want to see her feet, maybe we'll have her on again. You guys subscribe.
I am barefoot right now, just saying.
Okay. They're there. They're here in the studio.
But it's culturally accepted. That's what we do. It's not a sexual thing.
Yeah, it is. It's. I mean, to not shame people, it is bizarre that it is such a popular fetish. But I mean, there's other fetishes too. So I wonder too, like with that explanation of kind of what you described.
It gets paired.
Yeah, I wonder how these other fetishes get paired too.
They get paired unconsciously, and we try to repress them, but it comes out, and there's so much guilt and shame. And I just want to say this to all the people listening out there who might have a foot fetish. It's okay as long as you're not harming somebody. It's consensual.
As long as you're not like sitting at the rock climbing gym waiting for people to take their shoes off and like beating it in the corner.
But you're not really violating anything, are you?
That's illegal.
Right?
I don't think you can do that.
Doing what? Sorry.
I don't think you can jerk off at a.
Oh no, I didn't hear. Okay, sorry, I did not hear that part.
Yeah. I'm gonna get crazy.
Because I've had people who work in a shoe store. I mean, they literally go into that profession because they have a foot fetish. Wow. What are you gonna do? Control everybody who works at the shoe store? Come on, right? And people have hair fetishes, all kinds of stuff. Long as you're not harming anybody, it's consensual. Who are we to judge you?
Yeah, that's a great idea, though. They should just get jobs at Foot Locker.
They do.
and Finish Line. Hell yeah.
They do. Next time you're trying on a shoe, be careful.
Yeah, I'm going to start asking. I'm going to be like, what'd you think of that arch, bro? Come on.
All right. Well, I learned why the arch was so important. Like,
why is the arch so important?
Because, you put the two arches together. I guess, there's always a way of finding a hole somewhere.
So flat-footed people are kind of out of luck.
Yeah, because, I used to get these messages about, oh, my God, that arch. I'm like, what's the deal with the arch? I'm like, never Google that shit.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's hilarious that it was so innocent too. If you just
Very
falling
innocent.
into this, yeah.
And then I just started posting like, oh, now you're just teasing us. I'm like, so what? It's my page. I do what I like.
Yeah, I gotta get that engagement, bro. I might have to start a foot page too. Fuck
you
it.
can.
I gotta check my arch out after this. Well, Anita, thank you for being here. Is there anything else we didn't get to today that you want to get off before we wrap here today?
No, there's so much more we can talk about. The issues in relationships don't help. You can help them, and we can just go on talking and talking and talking. All I can say is that pay attention to your relationships. Pay attention to your mental health. The two are connected. Mm-hmm. Your relationships are not going well. Generally, you're not going to feel well. Yeah. And that's okay. And if you need help, it's okay to call a therapist. And if you don't feel so good, it's okay. People think they've got to always be, on their A game, and especially men. it's okay to not be okay, but do something about it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you kind of sharing that sentiment throughout today. I want to say a quick thank you to everybody who tuned in live today, as well as those people that are going to be listening days after or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure, too, you guys, unfuck your life and relationships. It's linked down below. You can get it. You can get it below. Check it out. Give it a read. I know I'm going to be checking it out and reading it, especially after this conversation. There's no feet pics in here.
No, that's
Sadly.
the next book.
Yeah, the next book will be
Unfuck your feet fetish.
Yeah, there we go. But no, thank you for being here. I want to say a quick shout out to our patrons to be up on the screen right now. If you guys are interested in getting behind the scenes access to extra podcasts, extra videos, as well as a series where I break down how I mix, master, write, record every single one of my songs. Go to patreon.com/Darren Rita. You can help support the channel for as little as $1. And you get shouted out at the end of every episode as well. So shout out to them. Also want to say another shout out to Alpine House 2 for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. That's at Alpine House 2 on Instagram. Check them out. Otherwise, this has been the 280th episode of the